everyone. Thanks for joining today for the panel discussion where we're going to discuss how our manufacturers are implementing extended reality in their manufacturing, and then how workers are preparing themselves to use this innovative technology in their day-to-day jobs. So I know Dan gave you a brief introduction. Is there anything you guys want to, besides that, want to introduce yourselves to the group?
Yeah, sure. First. So I'm Will Somerville, CTO at LightGuide. I'm head of the software development and application engineering and IT and all technical things at LightGuide. I've been there for 12 years. Really excited to be here today. I think we're going to have a lot of good stuff to talk about. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of my experience just deploying thousands of systems throughout dozens of countries with projector-based AR.
Hi, my name is Matt Wren. I'm the founder of VR AR Chicago, which essentially we are a consultancy that helps people, I should say helps organizations figure out how to actually use this technology and do the actual implementations. Think of us kind of as a solutions architect, but we don't work with any one software or any one hardware. We get to work with everything, and our primary focus there is essentially whatever our client's trying to do, we're trying to help them be successful using whatever mix of technologies will do it, and implement it in a way that it'll return investment, it'll be valuable, it'll be sustainable after we leave so that they can run it and operate it themselves, and then we can go away and solve the problem for somebody else.
Mark Reardon from Rolls-Royce. I'm the Senior Propulsion Manager out of Oklahoma City, not Indianapolis, where the rest of the company's at. Before that, I ran the overhaul facility at Indianapolis for Amtrak, but prior to that, it was 24 years Air Force, so I get to bring that DoD and Air Force experience into what we do in Rolls-Royce and how we interact with the company.
Thank you. So excited that we have three distinguished experts driving XR technology and manufacturing companies for us today. Before we start the technical discussion, I want to, with a quick show of hands, I want to know how many of you have directly used XR, any type of XR technology in your day-to-day job? That's quite a good number. So I want to start with the first topic that we want to cover is that when to adopt XR. So the first question that I have for the group is, how can companies determine if XR adoption is the right move? What are the indicators that suggest that it's time to explore XR as a solution?
Go ahead.
I mean, selfishly, I'll say like right now. It really comes down to the use cases. So XR has very specific capabilities that it enables. If you are looking for things like time savings, savings that you can get from essentially not being tied to a specific location or a specific space, being able to train people without the need for materials, there are very quick ways to evaluate whether a use case has a valuable XR solution versus whether some other technology might be good enough or better. So that's usually what we, generally when I'm consulting with companies, we use that as kind of a rapid evaluation framework, which is, first of all, are you making use of some of the real powers that XR enables? And if you're not, is there a better solution? So it's a pretty quick and easy way to do it. I'll stop and I can get examples later if you want.
No, Matt's right. Right now. Yesterday, probably, is when you need to start using it. From our side, it's, I know Berardino talked about how many small businesses are going out of company and how that's going to continue to get, that number of small businesses going out of business going to be larger and larger, and it's because they don't use any type of XR. Because in my world, the DoD is going to all XR, all digital, with all their models for all the programs that are coming out. And that's what a large supplier, either airframe or engine manufacturer, need our partners in the small business, and we want small business partners. It helps us out, it helps you out. But if you don't have that ability to go digital and to interwork with our stuff, with our digital, we can't forward it on to the military. So that's why I would say, yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the technology works. It's a tool, and if you have an application that you heard about today or that you see in the news that another company is doing with XR, you can do it too. And I recommend if somebody's not already just working off an R&D budget or just trying to do like a Industry 4.0 kind of spend, Your best bet is to take an application that somebody else is doing and do it yourself. There's some great vendors out there. They will walk you through the process, and partners and organizations that you can work with to find that right opportunity. The good news is there's tons of slack in manufacturing. There's a lot of quality issues, a lot of productivity issues. XR can benefit you right away, training. There's really no issue finding somewhere in any company that you could apply in a value-added, very short return on investment way, XR. So it is ready, but you got to work with folks who know what they're doing and steer you the right direction and avoid a lot of preventable mistakes, and you can have a really good experience.
And of course, the question's going to come up. It'd be a question later if we don't address it right now. It's going to be cost. Yes, there's going to be a cost associated with it. But you have companies like, I don't know, MXD that'll help you with those things. Not the cost, but the training, and show you how to overcome that hurdle.
I'm going to jump on that one more thing too. There is going to be a cost. You should know what your expected return on investment is before you make the investment. And it's not hard to figure that out. That's the nice thing nowadays. There's enough use cases, there's enough proven frameworks that you can follow, so you should be able to forecast what's your ROI before you make the big investment.
Yep. Do not invest money until you have that idea. That's very, very important. That way you get through your pilot, you have your good return on investment. Your CFO is going to gladly sign the check to scale that up within your organization because it's good money.
Great. It's great to know that the technology is ready, right? Yeah. We know that technology can deliver. But I want to put a question out there that we know that workforce shortage is a challenge already. We all know in manufacturing, right? So we have to generate more workers. But now talking about innovation in manufacturing, extended reality in manufacturing means that we need new skills, right? We need to upskill and reskill our current workers. How is how can XR help with training our workers right now?
You got to start. You got the just-in-time stuff.
Yeah, I mean, training is one of the more, I think, straightforward use cases for people to get their head around across a wide variety of XR form factors. You talk about the wearables, the tablets, projector-based. They all can do training. And what is XR good at? Why does it even exist? Like I said, it's a tool. The thing that the tool is good at is helping people get the right information at the right time, right? So if you need to learn some new process or new product that you're doing, in a factory, you have two choices. You could have an expert operator who's probably one of your better workers in your plant who should be doing value-added work, solving problems in a factory. They got to stop doing that work, and they got to help you, the new guy, pick up those skills and learn. And so if that person puts that information into an XR platform, now they can go solve problems and be value-added within a factory, and the new guy can benefit from all that information and be a productive worker earlier on. So from an ROI standpoint, it's very interesting because it's not so much that you're fixing scrap and productivity directly, it's more indirect from a dollars and cents standpoint. But that person's productivity, that's worth a lot. That's worth a lot more than a headset or a projector-based system going on your factory floor. So that's one of the things that technology is just good at. I mean, you can visualize things and you can understand the relationship with XR, especially. I've got this engine in front of me and I need to replace some part of the engine. It's really complicated. There's a lot of things to look for, but it's going to light up the thing that I need to pay attention to. And there's just no other good way to do that other than having that expert person, again, standing there pointing at it themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's where the XR technology gives you a better reach than you would have just with physical. Because now I can ship, instead of the funding piece, right? I can ship a headset and a laptop to anywhere in the world, and I can have that person put it on and then have the person back at wherever your facility's at, your expert, and they can put on the headset and you're in the same space. We're doing that right now at Rolls-Royce. We have a training class where I've personally been in it, and I've been in Indianapolis taking a class, and at the same time I've had somebody in Chicago, 2 people in Dubai, and somebody in California. We're in the same space going through tasks that could be generated on the engine. And then that's where you can get with the expert and say, this is the part you have to reach for. This is how you get to it. This is where it's at. Here's how it works within the whole engine model. And instead of shipping that expert to one place, now you just ship an XR headset, whatever headset that's going to be you're going to use, and the laptop, and you run through a training course like that.
Yeah, so show of hands again, how many people wish they could clone that expert within their company to be in more than one place at one time, right? That's a big one. And wearables do that. That's the thing. I mean, we're a projector-based company, so my boss will hate me for talking about wearables, but, and he's sitting right there. But wearables in particular, for experts to help somebody in another factory, that's what they're good at. That's their #1 killer app. Everything else by projectors.
I mean, the thing I want to jump in on this one too is the scale of, there's two factors of this. Number one, again, you start talking about what is XR good at, and you talk about time. Different people learn things at a different pace. So, you know, I'm going to draw from a recent client example. I've got a U.S. center that basically asked me, he's like, I need to train 1,000 welders in the next 12 months. But how do I do that? Because it costs me $10,000 and takes me 9 months to train a welder. I said, okay, fine. How are you training them? You know, because they're bringing them to a physical facility. Okay, well, you're bringing them to the physical facility. There's one thing I can eliminate, because if I can just ship them a headset, I don't need to bring them to a facility. They have to be operating at the same time as the instructor. Okay, there's another thing you can eliminate. Now they have to have all this material. There's the time to actually set up what you're going to do, what you're going to train them on. And every time you want to set that up, that takes time. And you got to train them on it, clean it up, set it up again. Now you're wasting materials too. Start to think about all of the little pieces of that you are eliminating by using VR. Person doesn't have to be there. They can learn at their own pace. So if I got to train 1,000 welders and I can only bring 30 people at a time to the classroom, well, what if I train them, let them get through 1,000 reps each in the VR headset before they ever come to the physical classroom? And it doesn't matter if I'm training, you know, these 60, these guys learned it in 2 weeks, these guys learned it in 2 days. Great. Schedule it when you're there. So you start to get this modularity, and then when you start adding the cost savings that you get from that sort of stuff on top of that, it's really, you know, that's when we start talking about how do you address the need for the lower 75% of manufacturers that can't afford, you know, $1 million XR implementation because they only have 20 workers or they have 100 workers. Well, you can kind of pool resources to train some of the basic skills, and then you can even use VR within your own environment using really simple create your own XR type of tools, things like Shape XR, things like other tools like that. Then you can do some of the specifics. It becomes a really easy technology to get into, and then you start advancing. But those little simple use cases, the value from them adds up very quickly.
And that's not to say it's going to take the place of a physical asset.
Oh, no.
It never will. It just enhances your ability to use that asset at with a shorter downtime, whether it be, you know, an engine or it be a machine that you're using, you have to train someone on. It just shortens that exponentially.
Next, I want to talk a little bit about the practical steps that manufacturers should take to evaluate their readiness for adoption. So are there any foundation elements that need to be in place before starting, like as end users or solution providers, and Matthew, you help manufacturers to start the adoption process? What are the foundations that companies need to have in place before starting the adoption process?
I like to talk a lot about what I call, people come to me like, what are the barriers for adoption? It's like, no, what are the perceived barriers for adoption? Anyone who tells me that an older workforce doesn't want to adopt this stuff, yeah, I've seen it done a dozen times over. That's not true. Put them in the headset one time, all of a sudden they see the value in it.
Few and far between yeah.
Right, so age is not a restriction. I will say executive buy-in is probably the biggest one, and that I will also say comes down a lot to awareness. It's amazing when you have the conversation with somebody from a C-suite and they're telling you, oh, I can't do this, you can't do this. And I'm like, you want to try the headset on and do it? Yes, you can. Like, it really is an awareness thing. That is what I would say is probably the biggest barrier right now. Once you start scaling things up, you'll run into other barriers like IT and distribution and stuff like that, maintenance. But initially, those barriers are really just awareness and understanding of the capabilities.
Yeah, I think it's the fear of the unknown the C-suite has in it. Like, well, if I'm going to invest whatever amount of money in this, you know, how quick is the return on investment? Well, it depends on where you're at in the company. You know, you're on the manufacturing floor. Are you in R&T? If you're in R&T, I can have a longer ROI. It doesn't matter. But if you're not, then that's what they're looking at right off the bat. And then it's, like I said, it's the unknown. They've never done it. But you're right. I've put in a couple C-suite people, and also on the Air Force side, put in some general flag officers. And as soon as they see it, we want this now. Well, before that, they were totally against it.
Yeah, I do a lot of plant floor work, and manufacturing on a plant floor, if you're not delivering a fast ROI, first of all, your group is going to be at risk of layoff, frankly. It's a very competitive environment out there. So you got to have that business case. You got to have a problem. You're solving something. And if the problem is productivity, quality, training time, et cetera, you can quantify that. And you say, okay, I'm going to invest this much, and I'm going to, make my return. So it starts there. And any customer that I work with, that's our first thing. Like, what's our success criteria? Why are we working together? How do we make this worth it for everybody? So once you identify that, then the question is, what do we need to do to prove that we really are going to give that ROI? And that doesn't involve necessarily bringing in people like IT and cybersecurity folks and figuring out how do we do this at scale and how do we get people trained across 120 different facilities on deploying it. You can do that stuff later. You got to know the value's there. You got to know you're delivering that value. As long as your vendor who you're working with, they are capable of handling those challenges down the road. So very important. You set up a pilot that's got exactly the right criteria to prove what it needs to prove. You execute that. You got a plan. You got deadlines. You got regular calls with the vendor or whoever you're working with to keep things on track. So it's just like any other project that you have in manufacturing. Once you do that, you build up your scale plan. We typically do a 3-phase plan. The first phase is a simple pilot. Second phase is the growth phase where you're scaling it up to a reasonable number. And then the third phase is you guys are on your own. You can deploy 1,000 of them. And, would just call us if you want to talk about another thing. Yeah.
Learn to crawl before you walk before you run. And again, you're going to run into different barriers at each of those things, but don't worry about the barriers to run before you crawl.
Yeah, because otherwise you talk yourself out of it.
Yeah, you talk yourself out of it and it's worthwhile.
Yeah, as soon as if you go into it thinking, oh, I've got to get this massive project, you're never going to get anywhere. Everybody knows that, right? So you just break it out into small pieces.
And kind of again getting back to the awareness and just understanding, most people don't think it's the wrong way. A lot of people don't think of projection as AR. No, it is. This is an available tool.
Yeah.
I was working with a medical device manufacturer at one point, and whenever I said augmented reality, they're like, "Oh, HoloLens." I'm like, "No." But it's a HoloLens. AR is a HoloLens. I'm like, "No." AR can be on a mobile device. And specifically, we were talking about a consumer medical device. I'm like, "You're shipping a $3,000 consumer medical device. Are you going to ship a $3,500 headset with every one?" People use their mobile phone, and it goes off a QR code. It's very easy. But again, it's really getting past some of that basic understanding of the misconceptions about this technology. Manufacturers, I heard someone ask the question earlier, like, when are we going to get to that time when people are wearing headsets for 8 hours a day? There you are. Never. You don't need to a lot of the time, hopefully. Personally, I don't want to wear a VR headset for 8 hours a day, and I work in this space. You don't need that to get the value. And that's one of the things that I think it gets missed a lot.
Yeah.
I think
it's not a replacement.
Look more of the process of it and not the hardware of it, I guess, so to speak that way.
Oh yeah, you don't walk around holding a hammer in your hand for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's another tool.
There you go.
Right? You use the hammer when you need to use the hammer, and you put it down when you're not using it.
Because if you get in the mindset of, oh, it's got to be this, it's got to be this process, it's got to be this piece of hardware, this set of headset or whatever. 6 months, 9 months from now, that hardware that you're talking about is going to be obsolete. So you got to look at the whole process of digitally advancing your company.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the high impact use cases. So what are the most impactful use cases you've encountered in manufacturing for XR, like XR in manufacturing?
The only thing I love about this is there's enough variety between the three of us. We're going to have 3 totally different answers, and we'll all be right.
Well, that's great.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm a manufacturing guy, so we're plant floor production people. So for us, you kind of got a taste of that with the L3 Harris presentation. So anywhere where you're doing assembly of complex or high variation work. So that's a place where a person would have to either memorize a whole lot of things, or they're going to have to deal with the variation, like what's different about this part I'm building right now versus the one I built last. And so any of that high complexity, long cycle time, high variation, assembly work, we're immediately going to take the time it takes to ingest the information down to 0, and the quality dramatically improved because you just see the information you need to know, you're going to follow the lights, and you don't care that it's different, you're just following lights. So super straightforward. Now, there's a lot of other related areas that we run into pretty regularly. One of them is part kitting and sequencing for all the same reasons. You got custom kits or custom sequence parts going onto a line. AR just does that better. It's a lot better than looking at a monitor and trying to piece together in your short-term memory, what did I see in a monitor versus what bin am I picking out of versus what slot does it go into in a kit box. So yeah, just that better shepherding of information. And then of course we talked about training. But the truth is there's a huge variety of applications. There's no one killer app. In my company, we've got top 3 customers from last year with 3 totally different industries, 3 totally different applications. So there's a lot of flex, a lot of opportunity. But again, I would always recommend anybody who's considering this, talk to other companies who are doing AR and VR, talk to vendors and say, hey, what are you doing today? Are you working with companies like mine? How are you helping them? What are the types of applications you recommend? Where's your comfort zone? Like, how can you help us with something that you're already good at? That's probably the best sets of questions to do. Because where you're not going to be successful if you're trying to blaze a whole brand new trail, forcing a vendor out of their comfort zone or work in an industry they've never worked in before, or do an application they've never seen before, that's where you got to learn all those mistakes for the first time. So it's better to copy, it's better to learn from other people's lessons and work with folks who know what they're doing.
Yeah, so top 3 use cases, I'm going to say, and this is one of the things that I like, because I very rarely deal with people who are actually using XR on the factory floor. Now, I will provide training for the people who are going to be in those positions so that they'll learn the safety procedures, they'll learn the basic layout of the facility, they'll learn how to work some of the equipment before they ever get to the point of actually being on the floor doing the assembly. But the problem is, especially if you're using an XR headset, again, it was presented during that presentation. You can't take away somebody's hands by having them hold a device while they're actually doing manufacturing, so they can't be holding a handheld. And you really, in most manufacturing facilities, you don't want to obscure their vision, even a little bit. So, okay, head-worn devices, that becomes a problem. It's a safety issue. In most places, they won't even allow it. So, getting back to to answer, that's what I don't deal with that often. Here's what I do deal with. Number 1, training. Training is the most obvious use case for this technology. It is absolutely proven. I have yet to see any research study that says that XR does not improve training outcomes in any factor. Time to performance, retention, you name it. It always works better. So training is the obvious one. Field support is another one. Field support field support has a lot of really cool use cases for XR technology because besides just getting to the actual work support, you get the data back end of it of you're auditing what was done in the field as well in real time because you can do that using the same technology. So field support is another one. I'll say design in general, specifically product design and for manufacturers, collaborative product design where you have people from different areas of the world that have to collaborate to build something. And that something doesn't necessarily have to be the product you're manufacturing. It could be the design of your actual assembly line. Like that's another thing that becomes a collaborative capability that a lot of, it gets missed sometimes. And then ultimately, when you develop XR assets for determining how you're going to actually lay out a manufacturing line or a product line, you can then take that same asset that you just developed and roll it over into the training that you're going to develop for that same line. Like these assets are reusable. I'll stop there. Those are the 3 really good use cases. Those are the 3 that I'll say I end up dealing with most is training, field support, product design, or design of some sort, collaborative design.
I'm glad I went last. Ditto. No, I definitely training, right? I was going to touch on the design aspect of it as well. That's probably the biggest piece that I deal with in R&D is us collaborating with another company in a digital space, and it may not be on the actual end item. It could be on a piece of hardware that it houses. It could be a stand. How are we going to...
The tools you use.
The tools we use. How are we going to put this piece of equipment on this structure we already have? Well, how do we design a bracket to go on that? Well, how does that work? Where does it line up? Everything like that. But I would say the one that we didn't touch on, I'll be the money guy, right? Sustainability. How does that advance my sustainability later on in life for the company and for the end user? So that's a big one of how we can use it and it can be done. It accentuates what we can do on our sustainability part of it. And it shows that expert work that can be done later on. May not be hardware, so it may not be a monetary break or a monetary burden on us, but a break in that, and it's just the virtual training of how we can do that.
Great. So among all these use cases that we just discussed, can you share which one, in your experience, showed the strong, like ROI was the strongest and the best?
The best application?
It varies.
Yeah.
I mean, I got I'll give one example from last year. I got brought into a company to evaluate. They wanted to do VR for training because the way it was explained to me, they have a huge workforce. They have 50% more capacity than they can currently meet. They cannot train people fast enough. And so they wanted to evaluate the training, like develop a VR training so that they could train people faster. As we're digging into how they're doing their training and how their people actually work, and this was a worldwide distributed field support team of about 2,000 people. I'm digging into their day-to-day use case and how they do things, and as I'm learning from what they're doing, it was basically they have all these different machines that they have to go out to client sites and maintain. Okay, how many client sites do they go to a day? How many, how much of that work could the clients just handle themselves if they had troubleshooting tools or if they had remote support? And as we're evaluating the training use case, which ultimately we did the ROI analysis on it, it would have been valuable. It would have saved them, frankly, tens of millions of dollars. We found the field support use case of you can ship these people mixed reality headsets, charge them less than you're currently charging them for a field visit, and add 20% capacity in the next 90 days, as opposed to 6 months from now. And okay, let's look at the numbers on that. You're talking 2,000 people, you're adding 20% capacity, you're charging 1,000, but now you're gonna charge 500. That works out to an additional $1 million to $2 million in revenue per day for something that doesn't cost you that much and can be done very quickly. So while we were evaluating the one use case that we thought would be very successful, and it was, we find another one. And so you come across that all the time. When you start digging into the actual use case that clients think are gonna be valuable, you find the other ones. And so yeah, I'm currently in front of their board and hopefully going to get approved for a second quarter implementation.
I would, of course, I'm always going to say training because just how we described it, how quick you can access the training. The workforce nowadays is younger and younger. They're growing up digital. The older workforce, the 55 plus, 50 plus. Yes, there's after they use it one time, there's buy-in, but before that, they learn manually most of the time. A younger workforce grew up with a headset on, looking digital, playing video games. They learn quicker that way. But I would say the design aspect is where we see the biggest return for us, especially being an R&T. Now I can do a lot of things in digital with a model, shoot it back and forth before I have to build the physical asset. Now I'm always going to build the physical asset, you have to. But going back and forth and making those design changes here and there, it saves me a year to 18 months, maybe even 24 months in design and mocking up your physical model and then advancing your program. And the best part about that is I can be working on one problem and I could be advancing the rest of it, but I can still work a digital model here to fix something while I'm still advancing the whole model later on. Yeah. So I think that's where the design piece, I think, on my end is where you see the biggest return for a use case.
Yeah, we use a business value analysis tool with our customers whenever they come to us with an application. And it's really fascinating to go through because a lot of things are pretty easy to understand when it comes to manufacturing. Like if I can make an extra part every day or if I make fewer defective parts, they have value and you can multiply that out. But the fascinating part about working in business is that these really nonlinear, sort of surprising, huge cash savings that end up happening where if I can build 6 months sooner or 10% more a day, suddenly that business becomes far, far more profitable. Yeah. And so, just a couple of examples. We work with one company just in the next state over who was building complicated assembly, but there was only one guy who could ever build that assembly. He was the only person in the whole factory who had the experience and knowledge to build it correctly. Anybody else would always mess it up and have really bad defect rates. So for them, it was an existential crisis. They couldn't produce their main product without this really core piece with the one guy who can do it. And so, yeah, okay, we made fewer defects, there's less rework, and that paid for the system. But the peace of mind in knowing the company is not going to go belly up and it just can't produce the volume they need to produce is really, really big. Another customer, they're launching new products and they're doing it in more than one facility in more than one country in the world. They cannot make them fast enough. Every one that they don't make each day is millions of dollars of lost revenue for them. We're unblocking that bottleneck, and the bottlenecks it pays off way more than everything about the project. The actual parts aren't that expensive, but it makes the whole business able to flourish. So that's the stuff where if you find those opportunities, There's no limit to the appetite.
Yeah, it may not be like you said, it may not be the part that costs the much. It's the time involved in getting through a process with a lesser monetary value part. So,
Real quick, just gauging the audience. How many of you are in those, like the manufacturers that are 1,000 or more? How many of you are in that like above 400 to 1,000 range? How many of you are in that under 400 range? Okay. Just curious. Trying to gauge the answers for the right audiences.
Yeah, good call.
So the next question that I have is, we talked about how companies start in pilot scale. So growing and like scaling up, I want to know how can companies move from pilot projects to broader and scalable XR deployments? Like what are the best practices and what does a successful scaling up look like?
I can start with that. So again, you got to have that success criteria in the business case, number one. Number two, you got to have a very clean first project with a limited scope, a deadline, and a clear success criteria in front of you, and work very closely with your vendor, if you're working with a vendor, to manage that project. It's project management 101. You got to manage the project, you got to execute on what needs to happen. The things that cause these to fail are people being distracted, your business environment changing, lack of training, those kinds of things. So the more closely you work together and the more you're on regular cadence calls and you have a project plan that you're sticking to and holding each other accountable for, the better everything's going to go. If you're working with a vendor and they offer training or they offer on-site support, take it. Don't try to be too independent too early on. There's plenty of time for that. You will get there. But you got to make sure you got a very practical, realistic project plan. Once you get past that phase, there is this more larger organizational dynamic. You got to have the senior team sign off on it. You got to make sure you're listening to everyone's demands for security and IT connectivity and maintainability, maintenance departments and those guys. You start to play that game. And that game's a little bit more time-consuming and involved. But you wouldn't want to start that until you already proven that there's value to be had so that the organization is motivated to actually realize that value.
that's good. That's good.
So the one thing I'll throw in here, and this is a fun one, if you don't have anybody at your company that actually understands XR technology, what it is, what it can do, make sure you're working with somebody who understands XR technology, what it is and what it can do, and that person should not be the person that you're buying your software or your hardware from. Yeah. Like that's plain and simple. I was working with a client at Augmented World Expo last year. The way he explained it to me 2 weeks before he was at that event, AR was accounts receivable. Like he had no idea, but this is a person repping a massive division of a huge major company, and he's out there being sent out to now evaluate all the solutions that are out there and what can we use for the enterprise here. Okay, you need to slow down a little bit because that's the other problem you run into is, if your only tool's a hammer, every problem's a nail. So if you're working only with a vendor and that's their solution, of course they're going to say that their solution is the solution that you're looking for. It's not always. So make sure to, absolutely the crawl, walk, run, I go back and forth between whether you should at least start thinking about what it's going to look like at enterprise scale before you do the pilot. You should at least be aware of what it would take, but you shouldn't be worried about addressing all the barriers from enterprise adoption before you do a pilot. Like a pilot's a pilot, it'll prove the point. Yeah. But again, just be, find that expertise. It is out there. I'll say there's not, I'm an independent consultant. Obviously, it's a little bit self-serving for me to say, do this. Find the independent consultants that are generally very good in your area, too. There are specialists. There are people who focus in AEC. There are people who focus in manufacturing. There are people who focus in education solutions that are not tied to a company that is selling a specific product. I'm going to take a little issue with what the MXD CEO said right at the beginning. Don't hire a consultant. They're trying to sell you something. Unless you're hiring a consultant that doesn't work with somebody that sells something. Because then they don't care. They're being hired specifically to solve your problem, and that's their only success factor. So I will say, if you don't have the expertise, if you can build up the expertise inside, that's another thing that I found that a lot of manufacturing companies in general, but ultimately a lot of enterprises in general, they don't realize how much XR expertise they have in-house. Poll your people, ask them, send it out on Slack or Teams or whatever you're using, and ask people who's using XR at home for a lot of other things, because you'll probably find there's a little bit more expertise in-house than you think you might have.
It'll save you a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you do need that internal person who knows how things work and they can roll with the punches and make things continue to run. That's important.
But when you have that person, make sure you keep them gainfully employed in doing things like that, or they're going to go to someplace like Northrop Grumman.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last question that I have for the group before we open it to the audience for Q&A is, what are the common challenges for the companies who are either new to implementing XR or scaling up from pilot to larger scales? And what are your advices for companies who are facing these challenges?
I mean, I'll go with the one I said before. Awareness is the biggest challenge. It's awareness at all levels. So the companies that aren't doing this at all, they're just not aware of what's available out there. Trust me, there is stuff out there that can support whatever your current need is. When you're scaling up, there's the awareness of your senior leadership actually understanding what you're doing and what the value of it is. And that's why, as you put it to there, like, have very clear success metrics before you get started. Because then you can demonstrate them, and it makes it easier for somebody who doesn't actually understand the technology and isn't going to take the time to put on a headset or try, Light Guide or try a mobile solution. It gives them that ability to at least see, okay, here's the value. Maybe it's worth my time to look at this. I will say IT and cybersecurity, those are, I call them perceived barriers as well. They are not as much of a problem as most companies think they are. Be aware that whatever solution you're working with at least has to have conquered, gotten over some of those hurdles. But ultimately, there are also third-party providers that will help companies get over those hurdles if they're not there yet. There's essentially solutions out of a box that can get through 27001 or SOC 2 compliance or CMMC. So you don't have to be selecting a provider up front that is already ready to address all that stuff. And they have to be willing to work with it, and they have to be capable of doing it, and they have to be able to work with a company that does have those solutions kind of out of the box. And at that point, you start to get over a lot of those hurdles a lot faster.
Say continue to be an advocate for it, because that's going to be, I would say that's your biggest hurdle, is getting through the C-suite that doesn't understand or doesn't want to risk the funding.
Right.
Because there is the initial funding issue you're going to come through, but being an advocate and pushing and showing how it does work, and maybe in using a small use case, a small project, to show how it can surpass their expectations. And I think once you get that, you get more of a buy-in from the C-suite, and then keep working forward on that.
Yeah, I think we got to recognize that manufacturing, amongst the various sectors in our economy, is a particularly conservative sector. If you go to your senior leadership and you say, hey, I want to do this whiz-bang high-tech thing, you're going to lose them probably, early on, because they want solutions that work. They want things that they can rely on. They care about the bottom line. So there is a way to approach it. I mean, I don't think, AR, I think you made a point earlier, like, you don't necessarily have your vendor tell you everything because they're going to say that you do everything, right? But I don't prefer a technology-forward approach. I don't walk around with a headset saying, where can I use this headset? I think that's the wrong approach. I think you should walk around and say, hey, where's my organization losing money? Like, where am I having problems?
Yes.
And then I have a variety of solutions to those problems. It so happens that a lot of common problems do have great AR solutions where AR is the best solution. VR too, especially for design, right? VR just really unplugs or uncorks problems that you would otherwise have. You don't use VR, you can't thoroughly understand the prototypes and things that are in a virtual world. You'll save a ton of money. So it's got to be problem first, right? You gotta be focused on the issues that are affecting and getting up to the senior leadership at your company. Like, what are the issues that they are looking for answers on, looking for solutions for? Start there. And if you have that, and you have other examples you can point to, other companies, things in the media, like we have this press release with L3 Harris about what they're doing with Light Guide, those examples are very helpful, because that helps that senior leadership team who's got a lot of options for how they can invest their time and money to feel a lot more confident that this is a solution that's really going to work, and it's practical, and it's not some dream that somebody has where they're trying to cram technology where technology doesn't belong. So that's something I'm sensitive to. Because Light Guide, we didn't start off as an AR company. We started off as a solution provider. We wanted to solve problems, and then AR kind of came along, and we started to use that label. But it should be the solution first. Like, what's the problem we're trying to solve?
and use your workforce. Start bottom up to go top down. If you get the buy-in from the workforce and you take it to the senior leadership, I think there's more buy-in at that point.
Yeah.
And on that note, know what they care about. Like, know what problem it's not the problem you care about, it's the problem they care about. One of the best examples I can give of that, I just heard an example presented about 3 weeks ago. This was done in Lockheed Martin. The senior leadership didn't care about the 90% efficiency gain. You get a 90% efficiency gain, and they're like, I don't care. What they cared about was the 100% reduction in errors.
Yeah.
Because that was more valuable. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
all right, great. So, but again, all right, you got to kind of pay attention and make sure that you're speaking to the problem that needs to be addressed as opposed to the one that you think might be the most valuable. Which, I don't know.
Yeah. You got to have confidence in the solution. If the solution works and it's solving the problem, then the operators are going to love it. You know, they're going to have an easier time. Their job will be better because it works. The leadership's going to love it because it's saving them a ton of money. But if you try to cram the technology and you're not really like working with the operators and solving the problem, no kidding, in a way that's efficient, then yeah, it's going to feel forced because it is forced.
We're going to open it to the floor for some questions here.
They spoke earlier about the ROI surveys that they were doing. As you all know, the intangibles of XR are fairly common. So can you give me a breakdown on how one would best approach those, I guess, surveys for a new XR project? Because, I mean, we're all immersed in them as far as convincing, the C-suites that this is going to be of value. So how can you give good approaches on to how to do those? Because for certain cases, I can put these reports together, like say this issue saves gas money, and it even saves millions of dollars of gas money, but that's not the matrix or the metric that we were actually looking for. So can you provide me with a good approach to creating these surveys, please?
What I recommend,
Yeah.
sorry, talk to any manager or director at your company and just say, what do you need to happen to get a good review at the end of the year, right? They'll have a good idea of, they're going to know where their company is losing money and where there's efficiency issues or training issues or what have you. And I would just start there. I mean, those are the problems that the leadership is already worried about and they're trying to find answers for. And then if you look through that and it's one of the top 5 issues is something AI can help with, then your ROI will pretty much write itself because the leadership's already looking at it. They're already starting to figure out, they're wondering how can we solve those problems. Otherwise, if you're doing it the other direction and you just look at any manufacturing line and you're like, okay, what if I did this? What if I did that? Then it becomes a math problem. You got a scrap rate. You got to figure out rework cost and cost of scrap and materials and labor time and so on. And that multiplies out. But that one is harder to start from those principles to come up with something really compelling than it is to just go to a manager or director and just ask them, what are your biggest issues?
From a simple math perspective, total cost of ownership, lifetime value. So what is it going to cost you to implement the solution? What are you going to get out of it if you're talking just the dollars? And the thing to realize when you're talking about total cost of ownership is obviously there's the acquisition up front, there's the setup, there's the implementation phase, there's the training, there's any consulting that goes with it, there's maintaining it over the lifetime that you're expecting. Lifetime value, that's the fun part that a lot of people miss. They'll look for a one-to-one correlation of, okay, I got a 40% reduction in training time, so that's great, cool, but you also reduced a ton of your training cost in terms of transporting people and your materials. So you gotta really pay attention to all the factors that go into that value to determine ROI. And a couple of these, they both sort of brought up, realize this technology moves fast. If you're not getting an ROI, if you're not getting at least 100% return on investment in the first year, you can probably find a better use case or a better solution, one of the two. Because first of all, the technology is insanely powerful in terms of what it can return. And so, like I said, if you're not getting that type of, when your analysis shows that you're not getting that type of return up front quickly, there's either a better use case that you can apply it to, or there's a better technology solution that can probably get you to those numbers that'll make it more successful.
Yeah. But that's a good point. The denominator, the total cost of ownership, it does take some work, especially when we're working with vendors, to figure out that total number. And you do want to pay attention to that because If you're too optimistic, then it'll mess up your whole return. So, there's a cost of the solution, hardware, training.
Your employees' time managing the project. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that go into that. You just
Yeah.
got to be aware of it.
Yeah, and if you go to your leadership with that all calculated out, you get a lot more credibility as well.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Amar Pandya. I'm an innovation manager at a local university here in Chicago. And thank you all for your time. This has been such rich information. And I know we've been talking a lot about like workforce ready skills. And a lot of what I do is not only like bridging the skills gap of today, but also preparing students for future proofing their skills, right? The skills of tomorrow. And one thing I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about is like like a ubiquitous set of skills that maybe just apply or maybe are really important in advanced manufacturing in the space you all are in. Things like stakeholder management, you said a lot of executive buy-in, and there's obviously different levels of employees, right? A lot of what I do is connect with various employers, and I say, what are you seeing and not seeing in your candidates? A lot of what we don't see in this digital era is things like communication skills. Folks that come out of college, they speak in text talk, and they don't know how to have face-to-face interaction, right? Things like that. So I'd be interested to hear just a little bit more. Obviously, right, you all train on XR and VR, AR, those types of things, but maybe some of those more ubiquitous skills that would really take a candidate far in the manufacturing industry or just in your eyes in your organizations.
Open-mindedness and imagination. I work in the R&T side, so a lot of that, if those are probably the two biggest things I would say. I mean, it's hard to teach that, right? But those are the things that we're looking for a lot more. Like if somebody's open to doing something different, it's going to be, that'll just expand what you can do later on. So those would be my two things, really. I mean, it's kind of tough to say, but.
I mean, first of all, I'm not full-time in manufacturing, so take that with a grain of salt for what it's worth. I would definitely say, I mean, obviously the imagination, but in terms of what you can teach, communication is a huge one. That is something that does seem to be on a downward slope, I'll go with. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, younger generations, frankly, starting with my own, which is not young anymore, but like we're used to operating in video games, we're used to operating in Zoom calls and virtual environments, so possibly understanding the difference in, the different environments you will be communicating in and the different methods you'll be communicating in. I think, written communication has to be taught better, frankly, plain and simple. I don't know how you solve that problem, but beyond that, I would just say understanding different modes and methods of communication and being able to use kind of all of them. Because you don't have, like, a lot of times you're not going to have a choice which one you have to use nowadays.
Yeah, I always take this question with a bit of a grain of salt because the basic fundamental skills of being a successful human have not changed since the dawn of time. And I always want to remind people of that. Like, you got to work with people, you got to talk to them, you got to figure out, how to emotionally connect with people and motivate them and all those things, right? I mean, this has never changed. The difference today is that there's some very interesting tools that we have at our fingertips. So you got to be aware of the tools, and if it means getting used to things like Teams or whatever, then that means you're getting used to Teams. Or these days, we're all getting used to prompts on AI, right? That's a skill that we have to learn. And but that's secondary. I think that stuff is pretty learnable. You should always start with a solid foundation of working with people and organizations and influencing people, motivating people, building relationships. If you have that, everything else can come. Because you will have a good relationship with that guy who can show you how to do the technical thing that you need to learn. And then if you need to learn how to assemble something or do some complicated process in a manufacturing plant, throw on some XR, we'll help you out there.
I'm going to jump onto what you said. Practice learning new things. Like, that's another thing. Learning, people think learning is like something that you're born. No, learning is a skill. You can practice learning new and different types of things, and then you get better at it, and you get faster at it. So that'd be another big one too, because the world is going to change fast. So
That communication piece, I don't know if they still have it. Maybe they don't do it anymore. But when I was younger, Toastmasters.
yeah, that's still around.
Okay, is it okay?
Yeah.
Get students involved in that. That'll take away some of that tech speak when they talk.
In terms of education, I work at, well, recently retired, but in terms of what you're doing, I'm at Daly College, and we have the MTech, Manufacturing Technology and Engineering. Well, they go through the training, they learn, they get certification, things of that nature, but that isn't sufficient. So in terms of communication, skills, we provide like mock interviews, but even before they get to that level, we have little special sessions with them to talk, to find out how they relate. They have an idea, how can they explain things? And then it's not a one-time thing, it's like an ongoing thing. But prior to them getting their certification and going out in the workforce, then we have our mock interviews. We talk with them, we present things, we have case studies, things of that nature. We bring in people from the outside, even in marketing, and then have them, approach and to present it. So I'm not an IT person, okay? But in terms of getting information out, I work with students. I have over 43 years of teaching and research, okay? But the idea, that was the one thing that I noticed was missing in terms of communication skills, how to relate, how to get across. And the thing is, we are life learners, okay? You're here, this is just the first step. And life goes on, and as the situation changes, culture changes, you have to make those kind of adaptations. So our students oftentimes feel, I've made this step and this is it. But you've only just begun, especially if you're going to be viable, okay, in a real world.
Push
Thank you for
internships.
that.
Thank you.
Push internships. That way they can get in the market
To provide this kind of work. In fact, we have embedded tutors, embedded professionals that are constantly working with, our students. And then there are a lot of things, even through your churches. There are a lot of, services that they provide too. But it's more than just the hands-on technology. Because again, mine was in medicine, and I knew people could just do hands-on stuff, but they didn't have basic common sense skills. You ask them something simple, they didn't know how to deal with it. They had to get a book to look it up.
Right.
So we have to get beyond just the technology. We have to not only understand it, we have to understand people, because that's who we're relating to for the moment. In a few minutes, it's going to be AI. But at any rate, thank you.
Yeah, good
We're going
comments.
to take one more question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Amir. I'm representing Caterpillar. So I work with the research team. So we check out or test all the technologies that are available for the manufacturing. So convincing a manager, it's like, it takes me back in time where I have to convince my parents to buy me a PC, telling about all the benefits it can give us, but they only see that I can play only games on it. So. What was it that made you choose the technology, especially Mark?
need to stay in business. COVID was a big push. I mean, you had to, with the workforce not being around, you had to train people. So we had to get out there, had to develop a way to do it. I mean, our training didn't just happen overnight, right? It took a while, and we're still advancing it. But the bottom line is really, big dollar sign. That's what, yes, there's an investment, but if you're going to grow the company, if you're going to stay in business, this is something. And knowing that for us, the Department of Defense is going towards all digital models for any new program coming out. So all the RFPs and RFIs that are coming out are going to be based in a digital model. The days of using an Excel spreadsheet and a PowerPoint slide are going away. I mean, it's just a simple fact. That's what it's going to happen. Now it's going to be, we're going to have it, whether it be a Cameo model or whatever, and what version of Cameo, whatever model it's going to be, that's what the requirements are going to be coming out at. So that's probably the biggest push for why we did it.
Hi, I work with the American Gear Manufacturers Association. And the reason why small manufacturers aren't here is because they don't have people to be able to get off work to come here. So I work to get information to them. Mark, along the lines of what you just said, how is CMMC going to impact the small manufacturers that now have to work with the digital data that you're pushing down into them?
It's a good question. I'm not the CMMC guy for us. That's okay. No, partnering with a large that has a group of people, an entity that works through that, I think that's the best way that small manufacturers can get in. There's going to be some, based on some of the conferences I've been to and briefings I've had, there's some rules that you will be able to be under the blanket of a large when it comes to some of that stuff. What's that?
So that's coming. That ain't there yet, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's going to be, but that's how you're going to get through it.
And there's some great programs, and MXD can help connect people with those
Yeah.
programs. So
Yeah, there's quite a few that MXD can supply you
I
with.
can say too, depending on which of the larges you're talking to, they've traditionally not been the most helpful at getting their smaller partners to up to speed and what they'll need. They'll just basically say, here's the whole set of requirements that you have to match, and then we'll talk to you, and then maybe propose a project. And it's like, okay, as a small company, you're trying to catch up with that and be like, do I make the investment to now, because it's a big investment, to get up to speed, to be able to maybe bid on this contract? It's like, come on. So I will say that there is, and this is something that, I've had a lot of conversations with DoD. There is a very slow shift that is taking place of the philosophy of, oh, just work with a large. That kind of was the actual responses that I was getting early on. Whereas now they're starting to realize, no, you're pretty much not allowing small businesses to work with you. You're putting more barriers. Every one of these programs that you put up that's supposed to help is actually another barrier. And so you're starting to see that shift a little bit. But I would say, honestly, it's really on the ownership. As you mentioned Northrop earlier. Is Northrop in the room?
Oh, they're
Lockheed, Raytheon, you guys, seriously, it's going to be a lot easier for you guys to work with the small guys if you help them. And you have the pathways to help them, because they're not going to be able to get through this stuff themselves. And a lot of them, and I can say this with firsthand experience, a lot of them will just choose not to. They'll just say, you know what, this isn't a customer that I feel is worth my time, because it's too much of an investment. And when you make that investment, you now have one big customer, and everyone knows the risk with that. So you got to be real careful.
But I will say there are incentives for large corporations to partner with small businesses. And the DoD looks favorably on those, in my personal opinion. They have.
yeah, there's money flowing that way. But again, MXD, this is what we're here for, right? That's what this organization's for. So, I think coming here and talking to folks, you'll get connected with a whole lot of really great resources. So.